Genesis 29. I've titled this Jacob's Life, but it's going to go on after this. It could probably have a lot of names, but I just picked that one. Life is not an easy thing, and what life does to us wholly depends on what life finds in us. As you face trials and different things in your life, what life does to you will really depend greatly on what life finds in you. Jacob left his father's presence, his mother's presence. His brother was marrying women left and right all over the place. He could have easily left his family problems behind him, but what he's going to find out is he brought his biggest problem with him, and that's himself. And he's got to come to grips with that. During the next 20 years that we're going to look at in Jacob's life over time, he's going to experience many painful trials while he's in Laban's household, but in the end, and this is really important, he doesn't know it, but in the end, he will become the man who God will accomplish his will through. Jacob is who he is now. He was a deceiver. We saw him last week, manipulating his brother, his dad, so he can get his brother's blessing, and then leaving and doing that with his mom and just trying to get through. He was a deceiver. And yet he met God in a dream. The ladder was going up and down for him, and he said, surely God was in this place. And it was a picture of just a transformed life. Something happened in his life when he met God at that place. There was a transformation. Just like when we come to Christ, there's a transformation that takes place. But we should, from 29 on, we should never read these chapters of his life as an ancient story about one man's family, because it becomes now a contemporary story about all of us, every human being making important decisions on the road of life, and this faith decision that we're in is going to determine our character and our destiny. God is saying, I gave you my son. Just like Jacob, I gave you transformation. What you do with it is going to determine where I bring you, what I do through. And I know where I want you. So I'm going to use circumstances and people and places and trials in your life to bring you to where I want you. You can surrender now, and we can get it accomplished now. Or he's saying, or we can do it my way, and we'll do this over time. And that's what we're going to see with Jacob. As we begin to look at his life all the way up to when he goes to Egypt to see his son Joseph, we're going to see that God has been working on this guy's heart, molding him into the head of a nation. We call the nation Israel. What's Jacob's name going to change to? Israel. The nation of Jacob, the nation Israel. God's going to transform this guy over time through many different trials, and we're going to look at some today. So in this chapter, we're going to see four things that kind of stand out, four things that God is going to use to mold Jacob into the man that God wants him to be. The first one, he's going to have an encounter. We'll see that. The second, he's going to make an agreement. The third, he's going to be deceived. He's going to get a taste of his own medicine, which he's not too happy with, and the fourth, he's going to produce a family. He's going to begin the process of what God wants done, 12 tribes raised up to form a nation. And he doesn't know he's going there, but he's going to go there over time. And Jacob makes an agreement, meets his wife. And then Jacob's deceived. And then Jacob produces a family. Let's look verses 1 through 4. We'll go all the way down. He's going to have an encounter here. It says, Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. He looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. For from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, my brothers, where are you from? And they said to him, we are from Haran. We'll just look at that. What stands out to you in these first 4 verses? Well, he had this gracious promise from God at Bethel to go to Pandanaram, which is in Haran. So he realizes he's right where he needs to be. He's on his journey to Pandanaram. In verse 1, it says, "And Jacob went on his journey." This term, you may have lifted up his feet. Anybody have that verse? It says, went on his journey, or lifted up his feet. It means happy feet. It's really kind of cool because it means that Jacob left his encounter with God at Bethel with great enthusiasm or great happiness. I mean, it shows a changed walk. What it means is he began this journey from, you think of when he was with his mom and dad and he deceived his dad and stole his brother's birthright, right? Stole the blessing. He left from there fearful of his brother killing him. Then he met God on the way to Pandanaram, and when he did, there was a change in his life, a transformation. And when it says, went on his journey or lifted up his feet, it means he began to now let the Lord lead him by faith and not by sight. He began to make this journey by happily trusting the Lord rather than trying to manipulate his own way. There was a change in his life. He saw the fruit of manipulation, I guess you could say. He looked at it and said, you know what? I want nothing to do with that. God is leading me. I am going to trust him. And he went with joy there. And even though he's going to, he encounters God at Bethel and a change happened to his life, he still wasn't fully subdued to the Lord. So God's going to deal with him in the same way that Jacob dealt with Esau. He's going to get, over the next 20 years, a taste of his own medicine. And he's going to get it for about 20 years until it settles in the heart and he realizes, you know what? That's when the name change happens. You know what? I can no longer be Jacob. Jacob has to die, and I now will be Israel. Jacob means deceiver. Israel means he who would let God have rule over him. Jacob, I'm doing things my way, manipulating. Israel, finally, Lord, you have rule over my life. You direct me where you want me to go, and I trust you for it. And when you begin to walk that way like Israel, you begin to see things that you've never saw before. You begin to see circumstances in your life that before would have killed you, or you would have done something to make it change. But yet when you become Israel and you get that transformation change and you have, like us, we have Christ, now you say, okay, I've been through enough trials in my life. I'm not going to fear this one, Lord, because you've brought me out of every single one. You've taken me down this road. It wasn't me, it was you. So you know what? I don't fear that. I don't fear that person. I don't fear that circumstance. What can they do to me when your mighty hand is on my life? Could be you brought them into my life to teach me something about myself. Could be you brought that circumstance into my life to show others that my faith in you is real. So Jacob's at that place in his life. He has this encounter with God, and he's going to have another encounter here with these shepherds, and then with Rachel. So Jacob says to these shepherds, where are you from? They answered him, they said, we're from Haran. And he's just like, that's great. So Jacob traveled over 400 miles through rocky terrain. He finally reaches his destination, and he's actually filled with joy because he understands that by faith, God led him to Haran. He had no map. He's not looking at the stars. How do I get to Haran? God led him there. And he sees this well, and here's these shepherds, and he's like, wow, this is insane. In verse 5, he said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And he said to them, is it well with him? And they said, it is well. Here's Rachel, his daughter, coming with the sheep. And he said, behold, it's still high day. Is it not time, for the livestock to be gathered? Water the sheep and go pasture them. But they said, we cannot until the flocks are all gathered and they roll the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we'll water the sheep. What stands out to you in this?
Timing.
Timing's perfect. Yep.
Just rushing them along.
Yep. Yeah, he is. He looked down. Here's this young babe. Shouldn't you guys be in the field? Like now? You have high day, or it may say noonday in your Bible. It was between 1 and 2 p.m. It was when the sun was at its hottest. Now, these shepherds at that time were not supposed to be where they were. They should have been away from the well and out in the shade of the trees in the fields. The flocks were given water from the well each morning when they would leave, and on the return from the fields in the evening. So high day was the time for the flocks to rest in shady places and graze and then be refreshed by still waters. And in verse 7 here, he says, behold, it's still high time. It's not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go pasture them. The term gathered there speaks of putting the sheep in for the evening. So what you would do is, at the end of the day, you go and water the sheep at the well, let them take all the water that they want in, and they had been feeding all day, especially midday or high day, and then they would put them into their corrals, lock them all in, and then they're all fed, they've all had drinks, they're all safe. They would gather together and hunker down, and that's really what it means. So what Jacob is saying, you're not allowing the sheep to rest and graze in the shade, but they have to eat before midday so they can come in the evening and rest. And he's saying, what are you doing with them here? You're not supposed to be here. So get them out. And they say, we cannot, for the stone's too heavy. We can't move it. We have to wait for someone. And what's amazing is, probably if Rachel's tending the sheep, she's going there when the male shepherds are not there. But they know she's going there because they know Nahor and they know her and what time she comes to the well. So they probably went there early, and Jacob realizes that, and he's like, guys, time to pack up and go. Oh no, there's Rachel. We're waiting to see this beautiful woman. He's trying to send him off is what he's doing. Go get out of here. And they don't want to go. Some of the shepherds at that time would all gather together in one place so they could all water their flocks, but not midday. That was in the morning when they did it, and in the evening. So he's definitely trying to get them out of there so he can be with her and talk with her. Yeah, they know that. The shepherds know that. But they also know who's coming to the well, Rachel. And so in God's perfect timing, Jacob shows up, right? Verse 9. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. So when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him into his house. Then he related to Laban all these things. Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. What do you see here in this? 9 through 14. It is pretty amazing that these shepherds, we together, a bunch of men, cannot move the stone from the well. We need to wait for other people to come and help us. And Rachel shows up, and all of a sudden Jacob's got the strength of Samson, and he just rolls the stone away, right? He's like trying to show her. I'm sure trying to impress her. And why did he weep? He kissed her and he wept. No, he's never met her. Because he realized that many years before, his mother Rebekah had watered the camels for her future husband, Isaac, his father. And here, it's Rebekah's son that waters the flock of his future wife. It just all comes back, and he's just blown away by it. This is how my father's servant met my wife to bring her to me. And you come walking down here, and he realizes there's something here that's from the Lord. What else you see in this?
He never met her, but he's kissing her?
Yep. Yep. It would be an honor. He's honoring her because she's a relative. And it wouldn't be like an intimate kiss. It would just be a kiss of joy, you know.
On the cheek.
Yeah, on the cheek, but it meant something. You know, you didn't just kiss somebody. You kissed family when you met them. And that's what he was showing her. But he's also moved because he realizes, you know, I'm a relative of your father. My mother's Rebecca. And he's moved by this. It's almost like he realized that my mother watered my father's camels right here at this well. It was just too much for him. But
Isn't he a cousin?
yeah,
They're cousins.
Yep.
First cousins?
yep. But they're going to get a license, so they're good, you know.
They'll get a blood test.
But you see some changes in Jacob's life. Okay, so he was a deceiver, really, the last time we saw him. And now you look here, look at the boldness as he confronts the shepherds and moves the stone and introduces himself to Rachel. He holds nothing back. He does it in honesty. He tells the story to Laban. It says he told him all of these things. That means he would explain why he was there and what plans he had for the future. My father told me to go get a wife from my own relatives in Haran and to live my life there. I mean, he would have poured everything right out to him with no deception in it at all. He just told him the truth and put it out. And Laban, I guarantee you, when he heard that Rebekah's son had come, he would have remembered all the great wealth that Isaac's servant brought him. And he was looking for a wife, so he was probably hoping that Jacob would be just as generous to him. You know, I remember how they showered me with gold, and I'm hoping that you'll do the same thing. So Jacob has this encounter. He meets Rebekah, and he meets Laban exactly where God wanted him to be, right? And there's a changed life in him in a way.
Laban's his uncle?
Laban's his uncle, yep. Or his mother's brother, yep. Older brother. And everybody's older than you think. How old do you think Jacob is?
Over 100?
He's about 80, 85.
They're still getting kids and
Oh, yeah. He's going to live to 186, something like that. Yeah. Rachel's 12. No, I'm just kidding. She's probably 40. Probably guaranteed, probably 40 or 50. Because Laban is older than Rebekah, Jacob's mother. So you look at the age group, you know, you're not talking 25. They're up there, and yet there's something there for them. And now Jacob makes an agreement, okay? Verse 15. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? He says, tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and face. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. He makes an agreement here. What stands out to you in this?
She was worth it?
To him, she was.
Yeah.
He loved her. So during his first month at Laban's home, Jacob was happy to do his share of work and happy for every opportunity to see Rachel. What Jacob didn't realize was Laban was a master schemer who would control Jacob's life for the next 20 years. And also for the next 20 years, God, by his great grace and providence, will be working on Jacob's heart and character through it. This is one thing. It's so very important to get this, because we've been taught our whole life to deal with deceptive people in a certain way. And yet, if our faith and trust is in the Lord, then God will use whatever he's going to use in our life to mold our character into the image of Christ. When someone deceives you and you find out about it, as a believer and a follower of Christ, what's the action to take? Finger in their face? Turn the other cheek. Humility. Humility for a believer always wins. And Jacob is going to learn that in a powerful, powerful way. And he has to. He's going to end up going to Egypt, and he's going to stand before Pharaoh. He's going to die there, but he's going to see his son Joseph. You know, there's a lot that's going to go on here. It says Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in face and form. What do you see there?
Rachel was the best.
Yep. Leah's eyes were weak. It literally means displeasing confidence. She had a soft and quiet disposition. It means her beauty was in her eyes only. She had pretty eyes. But that's all she had, was pretty eyes. That's what it means, all right? I remember John Corson was teaching this one time. He said it means dog eyes. But it doesn't mean like a dog face. You know how a dog does puppy eyes? And everybody's like, oh. Well, that's what Leah had. She had puppy eyes, I guess you could say. But that was all she had, that. Now, Rachel was beautiful in face and form. And that means bold confidence. That means she was very much like Rebekah. She had a bold and demanding disposition, and her beauty was in her face and in her body. So she had a beautiful face and a beautiful body, but it came in the character of a bold and demanding disposition. He loved her, and he really loved her. I think a moment of, an excited moment of decision, because he loves her. He accepts a job, becomes engaged to a beautiful woman. Yet what Jacob failed to notice here is that Laban made no promise that he would give Rachel to Jacob at the end of 7 years. He only agreed to give him Rachel for his wife. Jacob said 7 years. That's why Laban's going to deceive him at the end of the 7 years, because he had the right to do it, because Jacob didn't realize what was going on. But he loved Rachel in a great way. So it says, verse 20, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. And we'll see that Jacob patiently serves Laban for 7 years. And shepherding is not an easy vocation. There were probably 7 difficult years. But again, his love for her took the burden out of the work, and it caused the time to pass quickly. This is really important. Jacob truly loved Rachel. Now, Rachel was beautiful in face and form. And probably the shepherds, they didn't love her, they lusted after her. They wanted her. Jacob didn't want her, he loved her. And it states that because of his love for her. So, if it was lust, then he wouldn't have waited, because love waits, lust demands. Love waits, and it's willing to wait. It's willing to carry weight. Lust demands. In 1 Corinthians 13, it shows us the difference between love and lust. Love freely gives, lust takes whatever it wants. Love waits, lust won't wait. Love is patient, lust is pressure. Love says no, lust says now. Jacob loved Rachel. That's really important to understand, because he loved her, and it was more than a lust for her. It's been well said that happiness consists of three things. Number one, someone to love. Number two, having something to do. And number three, having something to look forward to. And Jacob had all three right here. He's got someone he loves. He's got something to do. He's shepherding. And he has something to look forward to. In 7 years, he's going to marry Rachel. And he's looking forward to it. So the time goes by quickly. And a lot of people, they say, well, was it really 7 years? Yes, it was really 7 years. And how fast does 7 years go by anyway? We've been here 20-something years. You know how fast that went by? I remember when I was in 6th grade. I remember my teacher, and I remember his name. I remember all the detentions I had. I remember so much, and it went by so fast. All of a sudden, you're like, are you kidding me? No. So 7 years went by quick, very fast for him. Then we get to 21 here. Jacob is deceived. This is an insane part of the chapter. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is complete that I may go in to her. Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him. And Jacob went in to her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this you've done to me? What was it not for Rachel that I served with you? And why have you deceived me? But Laban said, it's not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also for the service, which you shall serve for me for another 7 years. And Jacob did so and completed her week, and he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years. What do you see in this?
Poor Leah.
Was it?
Poor Leah.
Yeah, poor Leah. My goodness.
Yeah.
How do you wake up and go, behold, it's Leah? I mean, like, really? And this is what happened. So here's the man who deceived his own father is now being deceived by his father-in-law. And the man who passed himself off as the firstborn son now receives Laban's firstborn daughter to be his wife. And one inescapable law of life is here. We reap what we sow. You may not reap it tomorrow, but over time it will come. If you plant it, you will sow it. That's a guarantee. That's why God says, walk in the Spirit. Because you'll be planting things of the Spirit. You're sowing the fruit of the Spirit. And what a tremendous... Did anybody have a harvest? Ever have a harvest of the fruits of the Spirit in your life? A harvest of love, a harvest of patience. And it comes up, and it's not so much that it's being given to you, it's that you find that you're able to give it out to others. Man, I used to have no patience with that guy. I can sit all day because it's not about me. I planted seeds by faith of patience. And you know what? They grew. Or love. All of a sudden, you're loving people when you never really did before. You're loving people that you couldn't love before. And so, Jacob had deceived his whole life. And he's tasting that now. He's getting a taste of what he did to his brother and what he did to his father. I'm sure. Ever been deceived? Raise your hand. Okay? It stinks. You get deceived. You want to walk away. You're like, I just can't believe that. And yet he never tasted it. And now he gets a taste of his own medicine. It's a tough thing to learn. God in his grace forgives our sins whenever we confess them. But God in his governing sometimes allows us to suffer the painful consequences of those sins. And right now, this disappointment to Jacob was just the beginning of a harvest of consequences that Jacob needed to learn from. And he's going to learn them as time goes on. Look at verse 21. He says, give me my wife, or my time has come. He's all excited. Laban says, okay, let's throw a party together. He does it. Rachel's and he gets Leah, and then he wakes up in the morning, and it's Leah, and he's just like, what in the world is this? Right? How could this even happen? How did Jacob not know it was Leah, and where was Rachel during this whole time? Did her father hide her away? She should have been at the ceremony. How did he not know that was Leah? How do you not know? I remember I married my wife. Guess who I knew it was? It was my wife. She came marching down. If she had put a bag over her head, I would still know it's her. Because she'd be with her dad, or whatever, But here, how could you not know it? We're not told, and it's tough to not speculate on that because you want to figure out how could that possibly be? If Leah really so desired, she could have easily revealed the whole plot. But Leah was weak in her eyes. She had a soft disposition. So she probably didn't want to embarrass Laban in front of all his guests. And the truth is, if she had exposed it, Jacob would have been banished from the home. So Rachel would have definitely said something because she had that bold, outgoing. You think of an introvert and an extrovert. Who's an introvert? How many we got introverts? Who's an extrovert? Two different people. Like there's two different ways. So Leah would have probably been embarrassed. And the way that they did wed at that time, the wedding veil went from head to toe. So it wasn't like a bag. It was really beautiful and all made up and stuff, but it went from the head to the toe. So Jacob wouldn't realize. In the whole thing, he wouldn't have realized who she was until the next morning. And when he did, he was just shocked by that. All of a sudden, boom, it's Leah.
Because you couldn't turn the light on.
No.
Right.
Nope.
They're in the dark. I'm thinking they're in the tent, it's pitch dark.
Well, the custom back then was to prove your virginity. You had this thing on, and when you went in for the first time to be with each other, it would get blood on it. And they would take it at the next day, and they would hold it up and show everybody she's pure. And it proved your wife's purity. So that was part of the whole process. The Jews kept that going. They did it for a long, long time. They did it, they have been doing it from then, even before they were a nation. So, Jacob says, what have you done to me? Why did you treat me this way? But what did he do? He lost. He was let down. So he said, he learned a lesson of submission before God. Lord, what can I do here? Work 7 more years. He could have fought that and kicked against it, and he didn't do it. You can see the change in his life, and now he's learning to submit. And I think it's really important because you don't just learn to submit the day you come to Christ. You learn you got a brand new life, you're forgiven. Sometimes the weight comes off of all the sin and you're washed clean, and there's a blessing in that. But then you learn how to walk with Christ. You learn how to walk among his people. You learn how to submit to the Lord. You don't just learn that the second you get saved. It takes sometimes years of trials and facing those trials and learning what that means to submit. So little by little, Jacob is learning to submit to God's loving hand of discipline. And what he's going to do, he's going to grow in his faith and his character. When he goes back home and his brother meets him on the way, what does he do? He sends his wife out first with all the little ones. He sends first flocks to him, and he's just trying to keep peace. He's not deceiving. He's actually being a peacekeeper for the first time in his life. But it took years for him to get to that place. So he worked another week, and then he got Rachel, and then he married Rachel. But now he's going to endure, another 7 years. I think a total of 20 years totally. But he's going to endure all these more years of hardship and conflict, not only because of his in-laws, but also because of his wives and their maids. He's going to catch flack from everybody here in this. And when you look at Laban, Laban had to be congratulating himself on his success of his scheme. And what he probably didn't realize is that God was the one who was really ruling and overruling the whole entire event. Laban's probably like, ha, I got that one. I pulled the wool over that kid's eyes. And God's going, ha, I pulled the wool over your eyes. You just wait 70 more years and you watch what I do through that guy. I think it's really funny. You know, Joseph would say many years later to his brothers, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. The Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Rome, and he said, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose. God works in ways we cannot see, and ours every single time is to trust him when we've been deceived. He knows what he's doing. He'll use it for our good and for his glory. That's his promise. How many times have you been on a road that you just couldn't grasp you'd ever get off of or get away from or come out of it victoriously, and then you did because the hand of God brought you through it. And then you look back and you learn something. Wow, you know what? I've trusted you in so many areas in my life, and I never trusted you in this area, but you proved to me I can trust you here. You know what? I can trust you then anywhere because you've shown me that. And God has a way of showing us those things, a real blessing in that. And then Jacob now produces a family, verse 31. It said, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son, named him Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. And then she conceived and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah, and she stopped bearing. What stands out in this?
So wait a minute. Who's Leah's husband?
Jacob.
Okay. Sometimes I need a map.
That's, well, over here you need a map, big time.
Visual person.
Wait till we get to the next chapter. We'll need a map. We'll PowerPoint it or something. So Jacob's producing a family here. The Jews looked upon parenthood as a stewardship before God. This is before they even had the law. And for Jacob, that was especially true. Family was everything to them. And God is going to honor Jacob here in his choices by making him the father of 12 tribes of Israel. The fact is that in that, there's 4 different women involved in building his family. And they're going to create for Jacob one problem after another. All right? It's not going to be a sweet, happy marriage all the way along. There's going to be many problems and many trials. And again, you have Jacob, one man, but you have 4 women that are going to produce the 12 tribes of Israel, which is a pretty amazing thing. You know, when you look at the Psalms and God says, or Ezekiel or Isaiah, I don't remember where, he talked about the nation of Israel before they were born. He's talking about this time right here. Before you were born, he said, you were naked and squirming in blood. You weren't anything in anybody's eyes. And I brought you out. And I fed you, and I cared for you. And you became what you became. And we're looking at that right now. It's just the production of this family is insane. If you would think, like, if you try to think, how would God build a nation? How do you think God would build a nation? Would he get one strong man, that rides a horse and comes in and takes on the armies and he'd raise up all these people and he'd build a nation in a day? He took one man and through one deceptive man and changed his life. And as he's changing his life, he's then building a nation even through Laban's deception. And he's birthing 12 tribes that are going to be the nation of Israel.
But with 4 different women.
4 different women. Which is pretty amazing to me because God works in ways we cannot understand. I mean, you would never think he would do that, but that's what he did.
But in today's world,
Yeah.
it's frowned upon, but it's done
Yeah.
the same way.
Yeah. God still works in mysterious ways in that. But this is what he does. It's,
Back then, you could have had 4 wives all at the same time.
well,
Right.
yeah, you could have as many wives as you want, really.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, there was a law that said you had to have one wife,
Yeah,
one woman and one man.
right.
God created Eve for Adam. He didn't create Eve and Wendy for Adam, He created one and said produce and gave that the command of marriage. It's one woman and one man. Because man is evil, he changes that. Jacob got his wives. He's got 2 wives and 2 concubines, I guess you could say. And that was through deception from Laban. Jacob was going to marry Rachel and Rachel alone. And if he did, God would have birthed 12 tribes from Rachel. She would have had 12 kids at least. But he didn't because he was manipulated and deceived by Laban. So now he's got 4 wives. And he's not happy with them. He only loves one of them. Right? It says here, verse 31, the Lord saw that Leah was unloved. In the King James, it says hated. It doesn't mean the word hated today. It means that Jacob loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. It means he respected Leah, but he didn't love her the way he loved Rachel. He gave more attention to Rachel than he did to Leah, so his heart belonged to Rachel, not to Leah, I guess you could say. You look at the polygamy things that are out there today, I don't know how they even live in their families. How does your heart go out to 7 different women? You can't. One heart, one person, period. Your heart goes out to one person. That's it. And it should be for life.
And that also is the kids.
Yeah, they're all messed up. Yeah. And then they think it's right. I remember watching that movie about polygamy that the pastors made in Salt Lake City, showing how it destroys family. And there were some wives that were in their 50s, late 40s and 50s, and they had come out of polygamy and they had gotten saved. So they were interviewing them and they were asking them, what was it like? And then one woman, I'll never forget her, and she just burst out crying. It was horrible, she said. And she just kept going, and the destruction of the intimacy of your own heart was shattered, and she's weeping, and they're like, oh, why did you keep going? And she's weeping. I thought I was going to go to hell. They told me I'm going to go to hell. And so I didn't want to go. I want to please God. They're like, no, that's false teaching, 100%. But what we have here is deception, and that's how he gets 4 wives. And unloved means that he just loved her more. And so she gets a son, right? She names him Reuben, she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction. Reuben means kind of like this. Like she's looking at Jacob, and she's like, see, a son. Look what we got. We did it. So she's all happy. Leah was certain that this little boy, Reuben, would cause her husband to love her more, but it didn't. So then she bears another son, and that's Simeon. Simeon means one who hears. It means that Leah had been talking with God about her misery, but Jacob still loved Rachel more. So she names him Simeon. And then you have Levi. Levi means attached. So Leah was still hoping that Jacob would love her for the sons that she had born to him. And it had to be absolutely painful for her to give herself to her husband, who was just simply doing his duty and not sharing his affection. So she's crushed. But yet she bears another son, a 4th child. He seems to bring a new joy into her life, and she names him Judah, which means praise the Lord. And look at what she says. Verse 35, she conceived again and bore a son this time. I will praise the Lord. So the 3 times before, she complained to the Lord. My husband's not loving me. My husband's not loving me. My husband's not loving me. Now, instead of complaining to the Lord about an unresponsive husband, she's now praising the Lord for her blessings. Lord, you've given me 4 sons. 4 sons, and I praise your name. And all of a sudden, her demeanor changed. She began to be a wife that praises the Lord. And something changes in Jacob, and we're going to see it over time. But it changes when Leah begins to praise the Lord instead of complain to the Lord. And what changes is he begins then to love her. And what's amazing is, in the end, when Jacob dies and his wives are dead, he's married, he says, bury me with Leah. Oh, but didn't you love Rachel? Bury me with Leah. I want to be buried with Leah. So over time, Jacob learned what love really was. He didn't lust after Rachel because he was willing to wait, but he didn't understand what love is. I can tell you, when I married my wife, I loved her. I loved her. But after, how long have we been married? 40-something years? See how I say something that covers you. I love her more now than I ever did. I don't understand from back then. I couldn't have comprehended the kind of love I have for her now, because it grows and it matures in that. And so Leah came to that spot where she just turned to the Lord and began to trust him. And that made a change in her life, and it begins to change over time, so much so at the end of his life, Jacob says, you bury me with Leah. Rachel's gone. Bury me with Leah. That's where I want to be. And that's what he did. So though Leah was neglected by Jacob and despised by Rachel, she was a great part of God's plan to raise up a nation. God, through the nation of Israel, is going to birth the Messiah, Jesus. And when you trace the genealogy of Jesus all the way back, you're going to find out he came through the line of Leah, not Rachel. He was born of the tribe of Judah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, in the praise of the Lord, which is pretty amazing there. So you see that whole picture played out there. So what we see in this part of the chapter, and it's really involved, and the next few chapters are going to be boldly involved with that. But we're watching Jacob change. He's being molded into the man of God that God wants him to be. It's going to take many more years, but it's going to happen. God will fulfill his plan through Jacob. Jacob's going to stand before the Pharaoh. Jacob's going to watch his son Joseph close his own eyes and give the blessings out to all of his sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. God has a purpose and a plan here, and nothing's going to stop it. Not even Laban's deceitfulness or deceit. God's going to see him through. In Psalm 37:4, David writes, delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Delight yourself in the Lord means find the fulfillment of your desires in the joy that the Lord has to offer. And he will give you means, and he shall cause to be charged to your account the desires of your heart. It means his request of you in the center of your being, which will fulfill your desire. You'll find out that your desire is to know him more. And he'll make himself known to you more. That's what that means. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. That's what Jacob's learning here. He's learning that the Lord is the desire of my heart. It's going to take him many years to find it out, but God sees him through in that. Any questions? Pretty involved. Read the chapter for next week, and it'll even be insane, but worth it. And then the next 2 chapters. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for this time that you've given us to spend in your word. Lord, by your mercy, by your grace, plant your word deep in our hearts. Let it accomplish every reason why you set it out tonight. Lord, lead us into this week. For Thanksgiving tomorrow, I pray that your blessing be upon all the families in our fellowship. Let them just be touched and anointed by your love and by your grace. And let your Son be exalted in all things. Lord, we love you. We just thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.